it's Claire from Woodshed Theory. Today I just wanted to check in with everyone and further our discussion about ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder, and how it presents in females and how it presented in my life and how I came to know that I was on the spectrum. First, I wanted to thank everyone for their incredible love and support on my first video. I was overwhelmed by the positive feedback, and I'm still in shock that the reception of the channel was so positive and people met it with such compassion and support. So thank you very much for that. Now, this topic of autism diagnosis and how I found out and what autism is all about is such a huge topic. So I decided I would just write out a few questions for myself to answer to kind of spark myself getting going and keep it short. This won't be the last video I make about autism, I'm assuming. So the first question I ask myself is, how did I find out that I am on the spectrum? Well, I was doing some research on autism and watching a YouTube video. The title of the video, if I can find it, I'll link it down below, was something like Hidden Disability, and it was a young lady, maybe a TED Talk, where she was talking about how she had not known that she was on the spectrum until she was in her mid-30s. And this young woman was talking about how she never knew and what symptoms presented in her life. And as she was speaking, I was going, oh shoot, that is me. So I decided to pursue it further. What was my response personally to realizing that I was on the spectrum? I would be lying if I said it was calm. I think I internally freaked out. I tried to hold myself back from having a complete meltdown until I got an official diagnosis, because I knew as a person that I sometimes have a tendency to jump to conclusions, and I wanted to make sure that I was being mindful and wise about my suspicion that I was on the spectrum. I didn't know that much about it at the time, other than everything I was reading and consuming was just saying, yes, 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 this is you. So yeah, I don't know that I handled it that well when I found out. But that was just because it was such a surprise. Like, I had no, I had no conception of what being on the spectrum as a female looked like or what that meant. And I just assumed that that was not me. So learning that that was me was confusing, but in general it was a great thing. How did I get a diagnosis? So I decided right away that I wanted to be officially diagnosed. This is not something that's available to everyone, and it's not something that's necessary for everyone. But for me, it came as such a shock that I really wanted that reassurance from a professional, because I felt like the diagnosis came with so many answers for me. So I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't just reading symptoms and saying, oh, that's me, and then, talk to a professional and then I was completely wrong. Most people who are on the spectrum if they're coming to a doctor and saying, hey, I think I am on the spectrum, from what I've read, they're usually right. People who are not on the spectrum don't generally think that they are on the spectrum. So it's just something to think about. How I went about getting a diagnosis was pretty interesting, actually, because it's not easy to get diagnosed as an adult, especially as an adult female. I contacted my direct healthcare provider and my psychiatrist, and she let me know that the healthcare system that I'm currently in only diagnoses cases up to 23 years old. And she also let me know that it would be very difficult for me to get a diagnosis, and unfortunately she wouldn't be able to help me. So that was pretty disappointing. So what I decided to do was reach out to a local autism organization and ask them if they had any resources that I could reach out to in an attempt to get a diagnosis. And they hooked me up with a great doctor who specialized in diagnosing autism in adults. As far as how that process went, it was a few weeks of having one-on-one screenings with the diagnostician, with the doctor. And the doctor did ask me a lot of questions about my life and some clarifying questions. They did some research on me and my life on the internet. They talked to some family members, and after 3 or 4 meetings, the doctor was able to tell me that yes, they did believe that I was on the spectrum and affirmed my diagnosis, my self-diagnosis. And how did I feel? I felt very relieved, because you know what, you get to your final meeting and you're like, what if they say that I'm just crazy, that this isn't true? So to have that affirmation from a licensed professional was really good for me. This gave me the opportunity to say, yes, I am on the spectrum. And now when I talk to people about it or tell them in person that I'm on the spectrum, not that I tell everybody, but I'm able to say it with a lot more confidence, because the normal reaction that I get is, are you sure? Or you don't really look that way. Or, well, you must be really high functioning. Yes, I am 178% sure that I am on the spectrum. The final thing I wanted to talk about was what has changed since my diagnosis. Everything. And I'm so grateful. It was a little bit expensive. I had to pay out of pocket to have myself privately diagnosed by a specialist, but completely worth it for me. I have been able to connect with autistic men and women all over the world via the internet, and have dialed into that support system. I have been able to learn about autism and, do I want to use the word drawback? It's drawbacks as far as social functioning, and learn what I can do to cope with that, and what I can do to better communicate with others. I have friends for the first time in my life, and I'm not saying that's kind of hard to say. I have had friends in my life, but not how I have friends now. I don't want to make my friends from my youth feel bad. I love them dearly. I am just saying that from my perspective, my relationships feel different. they feel deeper. I'm able to relate to people more. I'm able to communicate so much better. I am able to ask people how they're feeling and listen to what they're going through in a way that I've never been able to do before. I am able to keep secrets better. I'm able to separate different relationships better. I'm so much less stressed. So yeah, everything has changed. I feel just overall a lot better. So if you have the means to and want to get a formal diagnosis as an adult, I would say go for it. It is emotionally draining, psychologically difficult, but overall the best thing that I could have done for myself. Getting a label for something is more like a jumping off point. And I feel like I've just jumped off and away I'm going into my new and better, more connected life, the life that I always wanted and never thought that I could have. So I hope that everyone enjoyed hearing a little bit more about how I found out I was autistic and my diagnostic process and where I'm at now. I hope to continue to make more movies like this or videos like this and share my story with you. And I hope that you will support my channel by subscribing and pressing the like button and the bell and whatever they have there now. Just to interact with my videos really helps a lot. And I will see you in a few days. Bye. I'm not normal. I'm really weird. If you don't believe me, you should grow a beard.